Welcome to A Study in Beginnings, the very first episode of this new lifestyle vlog with a literary heart where we are going to follow our fascinations, stay creatively curious. Well, we're going to follow my fascinations. We're going to follow my special interests and hyperfixations, of which there are many. I'm a Swiftie who loves Sherlock Holmes. I'm a Star Wars fan who loves poetry books. I love Percy Jackson. I love The Golden Girls, Nancy Drew, romance novel. I'm literally just looking around the room at all my interests. And so this is going to be quite a varied vlog. That's why I've done the study in as the format, so that we can just follow every interest as it comes and goes. This isn't my first social media account with a focus on books. I've had a Bookstagram for about 5 or 6 years. It's Dear Stalker Darling. And while that's been wonderful, and I've met such a lovely community of people who have amazing tastes in books, who are just so supportive and nice, I've been frustrated by two things. One, the format, in that I often write really long captions about the books I'm reading or the things I'm interested in, and Instagram doesn't allow super long captions, so I've had to cut them down, which is, annoying. You want to talk about everything that's interesting you. And the other thing that's been frustrating is, I guess, the algorithm, which is always frustrating, but I've been on there 5 or 6 years and I still haven't reached 1,000 followers, which isn't like a big deal, except for the fact that lately I've been seeing so many people who are starting new Bookstagram accounts and they get 1,000 followers in under a week, or so they say. Whether they're paying for those followers or whatnot, I don't know. But it was time for a fresh start, even if this is a false start. I am worried. I had similar hopes and expectations for engagement and having fun on Bookstagram, and as I said, it's kind of fizzled out. But that's why this is a study in beginnings, because even if this is a false start, I know I am in very good company, because perhaps one of the most famous false start in history is, of course, the very first Sherlock Holmes story, and this vlog's namesake, A Study in Scarlet. Now, if you've never read Sherlock Holmes, or even if you have and you just haven't gotten to A Study in Scarlet yet, please know that it is not good. It's not very good. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, it was one of his first big writing projects. And anyone who's a writer, I myself, can tell you that things you wrote when you started writing and the things you write now are a very different kind of quality. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote A Study in Scarlet. It was published in 1887, and he wrote it because he'd been reading some detective fiction stories. It was a new genre. Just detection as a career was a new idea back then. Police force was a whole new thing in Conan Doyle's day. They were just getting started as organized police forces. And he'd been frustrated with detective stories where the detective, just the solution magically appears to him. So he said, what if there was someone who actually followed the logic and evidence and gave you the answer? And hilariously, I think he had the time to write this because his medical practice as a doctor was also a bit of a false start, where he didn't have very many patients at first. So he spent his time writing. And he gave us A Study in Scarlet, which follows, if you've seen Sherlock, a lot of people have, this is where Holmes and Watson find a man who's written the word Rache in blood next to his body, in his own blood. And whether that is short for Rachel or Rache, the German word for revenge, I don't know. They are off to solve the case. This is also where Holmes and Watson meet for the first time. It's even their friendship felt like a bit of a false start, because there are weeks where they are living in the same building and Watson literally knows nothing about Holmes. He's like, yeah, a bunch of weird people keep coming in and out of our flat, but I don't know who they are or what he does. and I'm not going to ask, which I find hilarious. And so while you get the very iconic beginning for Holmes and Watson's relationship, and there is some of that Victorian, like the gas lamps and the hansom cabs that you immediately think of when you think of Sherlock Holmes. Half this book also just, like, you're reading along and suddenly there's this massive flashback taking place in Mormon, Utah, which, when you're reading it for the first time, if you're reading Sherlock Holmes for the first time and you start with this, as I did, I was so confused. I genuinely thought they had, like, misprinted my book, because why is there all this, like, cowboy yeehaw stuff going on in my Sherlock Holmes book? When it was published in a Beaton's Christmas Annual, it was this big, thick magazine, had, like, recipes and all sorts of things in it. Wasn't very noteworthy. Nobody really took notice of it. And yeah, that could have been the end for the world's most famous detective if it weren't for, two things. One being he was asked to write more, but also when he was asked to write more, he wasn't specifically asked to write more Sherlock Holmes, but he was asked to write something for this other magazine. And when he was asked, he happened to be asked with another writer, and that writer was at dinner with them, and it was with the publisher, and it was just like this very interesting thing where you get Sir Arthur Conan Doyle sitting with Oscar Wilde for an entire evening. And there's a lot of similarities after that that you could draw between Sherlock Holmes and Oscar Wilde. And I think that really helped make Sherlock Holmes who he is, although that Sherlock Holmes as we know it today was a very long process and the result of many people's input, not just Conan Doyle. But that's another vlog. So I'm going to take this as both my namesake and my inspiration, that no matter how this begins, it can turn into something really worthwhile and fun. I mean, how you go from yeehaw Mormon, Utah to the most iconic detective the world has ever known is kind of astounding. Plus, as I said, I'm a Swiftie, and my Lord and Savior, Taylor Swift, has always said that, being fearless doesn't mean being unafraid. It means being frightened and doing it anyway. So even if I have some misgivings, even if I don't really know what I'm doing, I'm just going to go headfirst, fearless into this and just see where it takes me. So thank you so much for joining me on the first step in this journey, on the very first vlog. If you've made it this far, please feel free to drop an emoji in the comments, preferably purple. My glasses will be explained in our next episode. Until then, please just think of me as your favorite bookish Elton John, I guess. I also love Elton John, especially his, have you seen his cartoons? The Road to El Dorado, like all Elton John music, and Romeo and Juliet. Sherlock Gnomes was terrible. Terrible. Like a blight on, please, never watch it. But Romeo and Juliet, 10 out of 10. And The Road to El Dorado, amazing. So yes, Elton John, amazing. I hope you enjoy these tangents as well. So yeah, please drop a purple emoji in the comments if you've made it this far. Tell me if you've read A Study in Scarlet, what you think. Tell me if you've ever seen A Study in Scarlet. It's one of the least filmed Sherlock Holmes stories. He's the most filmed human character actually out there, and that is the least filmed of his stories. I say human character because Dracula is technically filmed on film more than he. But anyways, but yeah, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.